The lights over Phoenix was an event that astounded the world about 27 years ago, and to this day, there's a lot to unpack from that spectacular night. Today we're breaking down all the theories, everything that happened, and more, so stay tuned. I think it makes the most sense to kick off today with all of the official reports from that night, just so we all know what the heck I'm blabbering on about. So on March 13th of 1997, at 7:55 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, a witness in Henderson, Nevada, reported seeing a large V-shaped object traveling southeast. Now at 8:15 p.m., an unidentified police officer in Paulden, Arizona, reported seeing a cluster of reddish-orange lights disappear over the southern horizon. Shortly afterwards, there were reports of lights seen over Prescott Valley, Arizona. Tim Lay and his wife Bobby, his son Hal, and his grandson Damien first saw the lights when they were about 65 miles away from them. At first, the lights appeared to them as 5 separate and distinct lights in an arc shape, as if they were on top of a balloon, but folks soon realized that the lights appeared to be moving towards them. Over the next 10 or so minutes, the lights appeared to come closer. The distance between the lights increased, and they took on the shape of an upside-down V. Eventually, when the lights appeared to be a couple of miles away, the family said they could make out a shape that looked like a 60-degree carpenter's square, with 5 lights set into it, with 1 at the front and 2 on each side. Soon enough, the object with the embedded lights appeared to be moving towards them, about 100 to 150 feet above them, traveling so slowly that it gave the appearance of a silent hovering object, which seemed to pass over their heads and went through a V opening in the peaks of the mountain range towards the direction of the Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Famed actor Kurt Russell, by the way, who is an amateur pilot, then reported seeing the lights to air traffic control. Between 8:30 and 8:45 p.m., witnesses in Glendale, which is a suburb northwest of Phoenix, saw the light formation pass overhead at an altitude high enough to become obscured by the thin clouds. Amateur astronomer Mitch Stanley in Scottsdale, Arizona, also observed the high-altitude lights flying in formation through a telescope. According to Stanley, they were quite clearly individual airplanes, but we'll get more on that later. At approximately 10 o'clock that same evening, a large number of people in the Phoenix area reported seeing a row of brilliant lights hovering in the sky or slowly falling. A number of photographs and videos were taken, prompting author Robert Schaefer, remember that name, to describe it as perhaps the most widely witnessed UFO event in history. If you've been keeping track, that's a whole lot of credible witnesses over a decently large area with roughly the same story. And this was ages before social media or email would have been able to help anybody corroborate that. They would have all had to have seen it and figured that out for themselves. So after all of that, as much as folks like us know right away that these UFOs were kind of otherworldly, what did folks think they were? Well, according to that author, Robert, this night was actually 2 unrelated incidents, although both were the result of activities of the same alleged organization, Operation Snowbird, a pilot training program operated in the winter by the Air National Guard out of a nearby Air Force base, which was, in Arizona. Local astronomer and retired Air Force pilot James McGaha said he also investigated the 2 separate sightings and traced them both to A-10 Thunderbolt II aircrafts flying in formation at high altitude. So the first incident, often perceived as a large flying triangle by witnesses, began at approximately 8 p.m. and was due to 5 jets from Operation Snowbird following an assigned air traffic corridor and flying under visual flight rules. The FAA rules concerning private and commercial aircraft don't apply to military aircrafts, so this formation displayed steady formation lights rather than blinking collision lights. The formation flew over Phoenix and onto Tucson, landing at Davis-Monthan Airport about 8:45 p.m. The second incident, described as a row of brilliant lights hovering in the sky or slowly falling, began around 10 p.m. How convenient, and was due to a flare drop exercise by different jets from the Maryland Air National Guard, also operating out of that same area as part of Operation Snowbird. Apparently, the U.S. Air Force explained the exercise as utilizing slow-falling, long-burning illumination flares dropped by a flight of 4 aircrafts on a training exercise at the Barry M. Goldwater Air Force Range in Arizona. The flares would have been visible in Phoenix and appeared to hover due to rising heat from the burning flares, creating a balloon effect on their parachutes, which would have slowed the descent. And then the lights appeared to wink out as they fell behind the Sierra Mountain Range to the southwest of Phoenix. A Maryland pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Ed Jones, responded to a March 2007 media query, confirmed that he had flown one of the aircrafts in the formation that dropped the flares on the night in question. The squadron to which he belonged was at that same area on a training exercise at the time, and flew to that Goldwater Air Force Range on the night in question. A history of the local area, published in 2000, asserted that the squadron, which is the 104th Fighter Squadron, was responsible for the incident. The first reports that members of that squadron were responsible for said incident were published in the Arizona Republic in July of 1997, so later that year. Later comparisons with known military flare drops were reported on local television stations, showing similarities between the known military flare drops and the Phoenix Lights. Yes, sure, on paper this seems like a pretty open and shut answer, but the government also managed to cover up Roswell for how many years by calling it a weather balloon? So I'm not trusting it fully. Also, this explanation was met with skepticism, as a lot of witnesses claimed the lights they saw did not resemble flares. And the initial response wasn't all military hullabaloo cover-up nonsense. Shortly after the incident, Arizona Governor Fife Symington III held a press conference, joking that they found he was responsible and revealed an aide dressed in an alien costume. Later, in 2007, Symington reportedly told a UFO investigator he'd had a personal close encounter with an alien spacecraft, but remained silent because he didn't want to panic the populace. Former advisor Chuck Coughlin said the governor's aides were concerned about how the comet would make Symington look during his ongoing federal trial on bank fraud charges. According to Symington, "I'm a pilot and I know just about every machine that flies. It was bigger than anything that I'd ever seen. It remains a great mystery. Other people saw it, responsible people. I don't know why people would ridicule it. Well pal, you're the one who brought out somebody dressed up in a stereotypical alien costume, so pardon most folks for assuming you were making fun of it in the first place." Fife also noted that he did request information from the commander of the Luke Air Force Base, the general of the National Guard, and the head of the Department of Public Safety, but none of the officials he contacted had an answer for what happened, and were also perplexed. Frances Barwood, who was a former Phoenix City Councilwoman in 1987 and who launched an investigation into the event, said that out of the more than 700 witnesses she interviewed, the government never even interviewed one of them. Just saying. So, were the lights a hoax? Well, that depends on who you ask. Not everybody believes the Air Force's explanation that the Phoenix Lights were simply military flares dropped by these aircrafts during training exercises. While the military's explanation has been accepted by some, a lot of witnesses and enthusiasts, myself included, express skepticism for several reasons. For starters, shape and formation. Witnesses often describe the lights as forming a solid triangular or V-shaped object, which doesn't align with the explanation of flares drifting in the wind. Not possible to be that precise. Silent movement. A lot of witnesses said the lights move silently, without the sound typically associated with military aircrafts. A 1997 article in the Arizona Republic reported that military bases say repeatedly they got nothing in the air, but now they say they do. But then they didn't. Also, duration? The length of the sightings was longer than what would be expected for flares descending from an aircraft. Typically, flares used in military training exercises are visible for maybe up to 10 minutes. The lengthier duration reported by witnesses of the Phoenix Lights contrasts with this expectation. Also, speed and altitude? Some witnesses say the lights moved at a speed and altitude inconsistent with flares, or any conventional aircraft. And once again, I mentioned this earlier, there was a variety of testimonies. There were pilots, law enforcement officers, and civilians who, yeah, the testimony varied a little bit, but collectively it all makes sense. Okay, how about an expert's opinion? Avi Loeb, Baird Professor of Science and Director of the Institute for Theory and Computation at Harvard University, said clearly they represent a mixed bag with lots of human-made objects. But even if 1 out of a million is extraterrestrial, that finding would have a huge impact on the future of humanity. If we find a gadget that was manufactured by a cosmic neighbor, we can learn something new about our technological future. These neighbors must be more advanced than we are, because they reached our doorstep before our spacecraft got to them. And finally for today, there have been more reports from the same region in recent times, leading folks to believe Arizona could be an alien hotspot. Lights were reported by observers and recorded by the local Fox News television station on February 6 of 2007. According to military officials and the FAA, these flares were dropped by aircrafts training at the Luke Air Force Base. But once again, history is repeating itself here, folks. On April 21st, 2008, lights were once again reported by local residents, and they appeared to change from a square to a triangular formation. A resident reported that shortly after the lights appeared, 3 jets were seen heading west in the direction of the lights. But an official from the Luke AFB denied any US Air Force activity in the area, instead of the usual military story cover-up. Guess they realized that narrative was getting a little tired. And that's it for me once again, folks. I've been Alexa, your resident ooky spooky girly. See y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.